In the golden age of television, where reboots, spin-offs, and cinematic universes flood our screens, one man continues to leave his fingerprint on America's sitcom landscape: Chuck Lorre. The prolific creator behind shows like 2.5 Men, Mom, and, most famously, The Big Bang Theory, shocked audiences when he greenlit a spin-off not centered around the beloved ensemble of nerdy adults, but on the youngest, and arguably most complicated, member of the bunch, Sheldon Cooper. When Young Sheldon first premiered in 2017, it raised more than a few eyebrows. Critics questioned whether the world needed to know the origin story of a fictional physicist known as much for his genius as his irritating social habits. Audiences were skeptical. And perhaps most curiously, die-hard fans of The Big Bang Theory wondered, why did Chuck Lorre choose to go this direction? Now, nearly a decade later, Lorre has finally pulled back the curtain on the surprising, and surprisingly heartfelt, reason Young Sheldon was ever made, and why it marked a turning point for the franchise, and perhaps even for himself. The comedy conundrum Chuck Lorre, known for his unapologetically broad humor, was no stranger to criticism. For years, The Big Bang Theory dominated ratings while polarizing critics. Some hailed it as clever, mainstream comedy that gave voice to geeks and intellectuals. Others saw it as a cheap laugh machine, reliant on stereotypes, laugh tracks, and sitcom tropes. "It used to keep me up at night," Lorre admitted in a recent interview. "Not the success, but the idea that people thought we weren't trying hard. That the comedy was low effort or condescending. That hurt, because we cared. We really did." As The Big Bang Theory reached its peak, Lorre found himself craving something deeper. He'd built an empire on high-volume laughter, but he wanted to experiment with tone. Something more introspective, something that wouldn't rely on zingers or studio audiences. It wasn't about rejecting The Big Bang Theory, he clarified. It was about exploring something that couldn't exist within the confines of that show. And so, Young Sheldon was born, not as a cash grab or a brand extension, though it would become both, but as a quiet rebellion. A different voice from the beginning, Young Sheldon stood apart. Gone was the laugh track, the multi-camera setup, the punchline pacing. In its place, a single-camera dramedy, narrated by the voice of adult Sheldon, Jim Parsons, that explored the childhood of a brilliant but emotionally detached boy growing up in a conservative East Texas town. The contrast was intentional. "We wanted to take a character that people thought they knew," Lorre said, "and show the layers that created him. Not just the quirks, but the pain, the isolation, the love he didn't know how to receive." To achieve that, Lorre stepped away from his usual formula and brought in collaborators who had experience with family dramas. The result? A tone that was softer, more character-driven, often melancholic, but still humorous in its own right. Critics took notice. While not universally praised, Young Sheldon garnered more nuanced reviews than its predecessor. It was described as sweet, surprisingly touching, and a show with heart, words rarely associated with the bombastic comedy stylings of The Big Bang Theory. Healing the franchise's reputation. Though Lorre insists Young Sheldon was a creative pivot rather than a reactionary move, he doesn't deny the influence of the criticism he faced. "I'd be lying if I said the feedback didn't affect me," he said. "You spend 12 years on a show, you give everything to it, and people still say, it's just nerds telling jokes. That's when I realized, maybe we hadn't done enough to show the humanity behind the science." He viewed Young Sheldon as a second chance, not to correct what came before, but to complement it. "We'd spent years laughing at Sheldon's quirks. Now, we could understand where they came from." In that way, the show became almost therapeutic for the franchise. Instead of walking away from Sheldon Cooper, a character who had divided fans and critics alike, Lorre leaned in. He made Sheldon the lens through which to explore family, loneliness, religion, and the pressures of precociousness. And it worked. Young Sheldon didn't just expand the lore of the character, it softened the edges of his legacy. Personal stakes. There was another reason Lorre wanted to pursue Young Sheldon, one he hadn't shared until recently: the personal resonance. "I related to Sheldon in ways I didn't expect," he confessed. "No, I wasn't a genius, but I was an outsider. I didn't fit in. My home life wasn't easy, and like Sheldon, I used intellect as armor." Writing Sheldon's childhood became a form of catharsis. Through the fictional struggles of a boy out of step with the world around him, Lorre processed his own wounds. And he wasn't alone. Many fans wrote in to share how Sheldon's story echoed their own childhoods, how it helped them understand their children, their siblings, or even themselves. "That's when I knew we were doing something important," Lorre said. "We weren't just telling jokes anymore, we were telling stories that mattered." The future of the franchise, with young Sheldon having concluded its run and a new spin-off, Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage, on the way, Lorre finds himself in a familiar position, riding the wave of another hit, wondering what's next. But he's also reflective. Creating young Sheldon allowed him to evolve, both as a storyteller and as a person. It also reshaped the way the public viewed the Big Bang universe, not just as a factory of jokes, but as a complex world populated by people who were more than their archetypes. Comedy is powerful, he said, but it's even more powerful when it comes from a place of truth. Conclusion. A legacy reimagined. So why was young Sheldon made? Not just for ratings, not just for fandom, not even just for the money. It was made because Chuck Lorre wanted to tell a story that mattered, one that gave context to a character who'd been caricatured, that gave voice to a type of child often misunderstood, and that offered him, and us, a different kind of laugh. One tinged with empathy. In doing so, Lorre didn't just expand the Big Bang universe, he redeemed it, and maybe, in the process, redeemed a little of himself. Let me know if you'd like a shorter version or one tailored for a specific outlet or tone, e.g., more journalistic, satirical, or emotional.